Story 1. This happened on New Year's Eve back in 2017, and it's one of those stories that still gives me chills when I think about it. My name's Ethan, and I'm from just outside Lincoln, Nebraska. I was a junior at the University of Nebraska, studying engineering, and I just wrapped up a tough semester. I'd stayed on campus a week longer than most for some personal stuff, which meant I spent Christmas pretty much alone in my dorm. It wasn't ideal, and I was already feeling low. To make things worse, I'm a huge Nebraska Cornhuskers fan, and that day, as I was moping around the airport, they lost their final game of the season. It was a brutal one, leaving them with a record that stung like a fresh bruise. I was supposed to catch a flight home, but, of course, it got delayed. By the time I landed in Lincoln, it was late, and my family's plans were already shot. We were all supposed to drive together to my cousin's place in Omaha for a big New Year's Eve party, but the delay meant my parents had to leave early with the main car. I was stuck driving the spare, a beat-up old sedan that rattled when you pushed it past 60. My mom, trying to cheer me up, left our golden retriever, Bella, to keep me company. I wasn't thrilled about making the hour-long drive alone, but Bella's this goofy, happy dog who's always good for a mood lift. I figured I'd crank some music, let her stick her head out the window, and we'd make the best of it. When my Uber dropped me off at home from the airport, it was already pushing 10 p.m. I didn't even unpack, just tossed my duffel bag in the back seat, grabbed Bella's leash, and locked up the house. She was bouncing around, excited for the car ride, her tail wagging like a metronome. We hit the road, and it was just us, cruising through the quiet Nebraska night. The back roads around Lincoln are all the same. Endless stretches of flat fields, dotted with clumps of trees and the occasional farmhouse. There wasn't much snow, just a thin dusting that glowed faintly under my headlights. It was pitch black out there, the kind of dark where you feel like the world's holding its breath. No streetlights, no other cars, just me, Bella, and the hum of the engine. I tried to shake off the day's frustrations, but there was this nagging weight in my chest. Maybe it was the Cornhuskers' loss, or spending Christmas alone, or the fact that I was driving to a party I wasn't even sure I wanted to go to. Bella was curled up in the passenger seat, her soft snores filling the silence, and I envied how carefree she was. About 30 minutes in, she started to stir, letting out a little whine. At first, I thought she just wanted attention, but then she sat up, paws shifting restlessly. I knew that look. She needed a bathroom break. I groaned, scanning the road for a place to pull over. These roads don't exactly have rest stops, so I kept driving until I spotted a small clearing, barely wide enough for the car. I eased onto the shoulder, the gravel crunching under the tires, and cut the engine. The silence hit me like a wave, thick and heavy, broken only by Bella's eager panting. I opened the door, and the cold bit at my face, sharp and unrelenting. I stuffed my hands in my pockets, already dreading stepping out into the dark. Something about that moment, the stillness, the endless black beyond the headlights, made me feel like we weren't as alone as I thought. I was standing by the car, shivering in the Nebraska cold, watching Bella sniff around the edge of the clearing. The night was so dark it felt like the world ended where my headlights stopped. Then, out of nowhere, a loud crash echoed from the woods, like something heavy was stomping through the trees, deliberate and close. My heart jumped into my throat, and before I could call her, Bella bolted straight into the darkness. I yelled her name, my voice swallowed by the night, but she was gone in seconds. Panic hit me like a freight train. I couldn't leave her out there. Not Bella, not my best friend. Without thinking, I grabbed my phone, flicked on the dim flashlight, and ran into the woods. The thin snow barely lit my path, and I was half blind, dodging trees, shouting for her. My lungs burned from the cold, but I kept going, adrenaline drowning out the fear of what might be out there. All I could think was finding her before she reached whatever made that noise. I don't know how long I ran, maybe minutes, maybe longer, until my legs gave out. I collapsed against a tree, gasping, feeling like I'd lost her for good. That's when I saw her, crouched low, tail tucked, creeping toward me like she was scared out of her mind. I'd never seen Bella like that. I dropped to my knees, pulling her close, relief flooding me as her trembling body pressed against mine. But then it hit me. We were still deep in the woods, and something had terrified her. The air felt heavier, like eyes were on us. I whispered for her to follow and started back, praying I was going the right way. Bella stuck close, her usual bounce gone. Then, another crash. Louder, closer, right behind us. My stomach dropped. I didn't look back. I just ran, Bella darting ahead. The crashing didn't stop, like it was chasing us, branches snapping in the dark. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it had burst. I was sure we were done for. Somehow, Bella led us straight to the car. I threw open the door, shoved her inside, and jumped in, slamming it shut. As I fumbled for the keys, I glanced at the woods and froze. 3 figures stood at the tree line, just watching, their shapes barely visible in the dark. My hand shook as I started the car and floored it, tires spinning on the gravel. I didn't slow down, didn't look back, just drove until the woods were a distant blur. A few miles later, I noticed Bella whimpering. In the dim light, I saw blood on her fur. A clean cut below her shoulder, like someone had sliced her. My chest tightened. I pulled over, hands trembling, and dug through the trunk for my mom's first aid kit. Thank God she's paranoid about being prepared. I cleaned the wound as best I could, wrapping it in gauze while Bella whined. I kept muttering apologies, trying not to think about who did this. Back on the road, the shock settled in. I couldn't process it. Those figures, the cut, the chase. It felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. I didn't tell my family when I got to Omaha. I don't know why. Maybe it was too raw, too unreal. Even now, I feel that same chill when I think about those eyes in the dark, watching us, waiting. It's not the blood or the cut that haunts me. It's the feeling that we barely escaped something I still don't understand. Story 2. This happened a few years back on New Year's Eve, and it's one of those nights I can't shake, no matter how hard I try. My name's Noah, and I was living in a small town just outside Boise, Idaho. I was driving to my parents' house in Boise to ring in the new year with them, a tradition we'd kept since I was a kid. I've always loved long drives. There's something about the open road, just you and your thoughts, that feels like a reset. The drive was supposed to be a straight shot, about 2 hours, and I left in the late afternoon, figuring I'd get there with plenty of time to spare. My little sedan wasn't much to look at, but it got me where I needed to go. The weather was clear when I started, and I was in a good mood, humming along to some old rock tunes, thinking about the homemade chili my mom always makes for New Year's. But about an hour in, the sky turned ugly. Snow started falling, just flurries at first, dusting the windshield like powdered sugar. It was almost pretty, and I didn't think much of it, but I must have jinxed myself, because the snow kept coming, heavier and heavier, until I was caught in a full-on blizzard. The highway got slick, and visibility dropped to nothing. I could barely see 10 feet ahead. My car wasn't built for this. The tires started slipping on even the smallest hills, and my wipers couldn't keep up with the snow piling on the glass. I knew I couldn't keep going. It was too dangerous. I cursed myself for not checking the forecast better, but there was no turning back now. I found a spot on the shoulder, far enough off the road to avoid any cars that might come by, though there weren't many out in this mess. I texted my parents to let them know I was stuck, and they were worried sick, especially my mom. I tried to play it cool, telling them I'd wait it out, but honestly, I wasn't so sure. The snow just kept falling, blanketing the car, and the wind howled like it was trying to tear the world apart. I figured I'd sit tight until the storm eased up, but after an hour, it was clear this wasn't letting up anytime soon. My dad offered to drive out to get me, but I shut that down fast. That was a suicide mission in this weather. I told them I'd call the police if things got worse, which calmed them down a bit, but I really didn't want to do that. I didn't have AAA, so towing wasn't an option either. I just kept telling myself the storm had to break eventually. To save gas, I turned the engine on for a few minutes to warm up, then off again, trying not to drain the battery. The isolation started to creep in, sitting there in the dark, the snow piling up around me like a cage. I felt cut off from everything, just me and the storm, with no idea how long I'd be stuck. The cold was seeping into the car, and I was starting to feel that gnawing sense of being watched, like the darkness outside was hiding something. I shook it off, blaming my nerves, but then I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw headlights cutting through the blizzard behind me. Relief washed over me. Someone was out there. But as they got closer, that feeling twisted into something else, something uneasy, like I wasn't as safe as I thought. Those headlights in my rearview mirror felt like a lifeline cutting through the Idaho blizzard. A snowplow pulled up beside me, and I nearly cheered. The driver, an older guy, maybe late 50s, leaned out his window. He had a weathered face, all wrinkles and creases, bundled in a thick jacket and a knit hat pulled low. I rolled down my window, expecting a quick check-in, but he just stared at me for a beat too long, like he was sizing me up. Finally, he asked if I was okay, his voice rough, like he'd smoked a pack a day for decades. I told him my car couldn't handle the storm, trying to sound calm despite the weird vibe. He nodded, saying, "I wouldn't get far in this weather, especially in my sedan." Then he paused, his eyes flicking to my back seat, like he was looking for something, or someone. My stomach twisted, but I brushed it off. He offered me a ride, and I hesitated. I didn't know this guy, and yeah, he seemed off. But sitting in my car all night, freezing, wasn't smart. I asked if he could take me to Boise, and he said no problem. When I asked about my car, he just shrugged and said to leave it. Against my better judgment, I grabbed my bag and climbed into the plow's cab. The warmth hit me like a wave, easing the tension in my shoulders. I gave him directions to my parents' place, and he nodded but didn't say much. The silence wasn't awkward, but as we drove, I started feeling uneasy. Then I noticed we weren't heading toward Boise. My phone's GPS showed us going the opposite way. My heart sped up. Trying to sound casual, I asked if we were going the right way. Without looking at me, he mumbled something about a detour, saying the back roads were better. His tone was flat, and I didn't buy it. I glanced around the cab, and red flags were everywhere. Empty liquor bottles rolling by his feet, torn maps stuffed in the door pocket, and the glint of a knife wedged between the seats. My pulse was racing now, loud enough that I worried he could hear it. The GPS kept recalibrating as he missed turn after turn, ignoring it completely. I knew we were nowhere near Boise. Panic clawed at me, but I kept quiet, scanning for a way out. Then, through the snow, I saw a faint light. A house, the only one for miles. It was my shot. I waited until we got closer, my hand on the door handle. Taking a deep breath, I kicked the door open and jumped. The cold slammed into me, and I hit the ground hard, pain shooting through my leg. I didn't stop, scrambled to my feet, and sprinted toward the house. The guy yelled something, and I glanced back to see him reaching into the glove box, maybe for a gun. I didn't look again, just ran, slipping in the snow, until I reached the door. I pounded on it, screaming for help. A couple opened it, pulling me inside as I collapsed, gasping. I blurted out what happened, and they called the police without hesitation. By the time the cops arrived, the plow was gone, lost in the storm. They said they'd search, but in that weather, it was a long shot. They drove me to my parents' house and helped arrange a tow for my car. I was safe, but the whole drive, I kept thinking about that guy's stare, the knife, the wrong turns. It wasn't some monster. It was the quiet, creeping dread of realizing I was trapped with someone I couldn't trust, and how close I came to not making it out. Story 3. This happened a couple of years ago on New Year's Eve, and it's one of those stories that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. My name's Liam, and I grew up in a small rural town just outside Duluth, Minnesota. I've never been big on parties. Even in college, I'd rather hang out with a few close friends than deal with crowded bars. Growing up, my dad had this New Year's Eve tradition of going ice fishing with his buddies and my brother out on a frozen lake. while everyone else was popping champagne. My mom wasn't around much, and we didn't have a big family, so those trips were my New Year's. Dad's gone now, and my brother moved to Denver years ago, but I feel this pull to keep the tradition alive. It's like a way to stay connected to him. My two best friends, Connor and Mason, are always up for it. They're the kind of guys you'd picture chopping wood in flannel. Tough, outdoorsy, and more at home in the wild than in a city. That's me too, I guess. We plan to hit a secluded lake near Duluth, one we'd been to before. It's not a spot tourists know about, tucked away behind thick pines, with ice that stays solid even in milder winters. Connor was driving his truck, a big beat-up thing with huge tires and four-wheel drive, perfect for hauling our gear. We packed everything: rods, tip-ups, bait, a sled for the heavy stuff, and a pop-up shelter to block the wind. The forecast said clear skies, but in Minnesota, you never trust the weather. We were ready for anything, or so we thought. As we loaded up, there was this buzz of excitement. Ice fishing's quiet, just you, your buddies, and the lake, waiting for a bite. It's way better than getting drunk at some random party. The drive out was all back roads, snow-covered, and winding through forests that felt like they went on forever. We were joking around, blasting some country tunes, already talking about who'd catch the biggest fish. Connor was in high spirits, telling stories about the time he nearly fell through thin ice as a kid. Mason was messing with the heater, complaining it wasn't warm enough. It felt like the start of a perfect night. When we pulled up to the trailhead near the lake, the sun was gone, and the air was sharp, the kind of cold that stings your face. We parked, and I noticed a guy standing a few yards away, bundled in heavy winter gear. He wasn't moving, just staring at our truck. At first, I figured he was another fisherman, maybe checking us out, but something felt wrong. He kept glancing at his phone, then back at us, then his phone again. It wasn't casual. It was like he was studying us. I muttered to Connor and Mason that the guy was creeping me out. Mason shrugged, saying he was probably just some loner, but Connor gave me a look, like he felt it too. We started unloading, grabbing the sled and rods, but the whole time, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The woods were too quiet, the darkness too thick, and that guy's stare stuck with me. I told myself I was overthinking it, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. We were out there, miles from anyone, and that sense of being alone, really alone, started to settle in, heavy and unsettling. That guy by the trailhead was still on my mind as we grabbed our gear, but before we could even start toward the lake, he came running at us, waving his arms like a madman. I rolled down the truck window, and he was screaming that his buddy had fallen through the ice, pointing at his phone, saying another friend had just called him. His voice was frantic, his eyes wild, and it felt so real that we didn't think twice. Connor was out the door first, then Mason and I followed, leaving our coats and gear behind. We jogged after him down the snowy trail, the Minnesota cold biting at my skin. He was moving fast, leading us toward the lake, and my heart was pounding. Not just from running, but from this sinking feeling I couldn't shake. As we got closer, I noticed he wasn't taking us to the usual fishing spots. We were headed to a remote part of the shoreline, where the ice was thinner and the trees were thicker. I wanted to stop, to ask what was going on, but it was too late. Two more guys stepped out from the shadows near the lake, standing still, waiting. They weren't dressed for fishing. No rods, no gear, just heavy jackets and hard stares. My blood ran cold when I saw their hands. One had a gun pointed right at me. The other held a knife. The guy we'd followed turned, a smirk creeping across his face, and I knew we'd been set up. My stomach dropped. The guy with the gun yelled for us to stop, and we froze. I've never felt anything like that moment. Pure, helpless fear, like the world was closing in. The second guy demanded Connor's keys and everything we had. We didn't argue. Those guys weren't bluffing. Connor tossed the keys, and we emptied our pockets, wallets, my phone, everything. I tried to slip my phone back, but the knife guy snapped at me to hand it over. Connor lied, saying he was in the truck, and they laughed, like it didn't matter. I was furious, clenching my fist, but what could we do? They had us. They marched us back to the trail at gunpoint, the snow crunching under our boots, the cold sinking deeper with every step. One of them peeled off, jumping into Connor's truck and speeding away. The other two backed into the woods, probably to their own car, and were gone. We stood there, shivering, stunned, the darkness swallowing us. I wanted to chase them, but Mason grabbed my arm, saying it wasn't worth it. Then Connor pulled out his phone. He'd lied about leaving it. I could have hugged him. We had a signal, barely, and he called the cops, explaining everything as best he could. The dispatcher told us to stay put, and we huddled together, trying to stay warm in the biting cold. I was shaking, not just from the temperature, but from rage and disbelief. Why us? Why here? In the middle of nowhere, on New Year's Eve. The cops showed up after what felt like forever, took our statements, and drove us to Mason's place, the closest house. They said they'd look for the truck, but in that snow, it was long gone. They never found those guys either. Connor was a mess, kicking trees, cursing until his voice gave out. Mason thinks it was random, that we just crossed paths with the wrong people. I'm not so sure. It felt too planned, too perfect. But what haunts me isn't the stuff they took. It's that feeling of being watched, played, and powerless, out there in the dark, with no one to hear us scream.